Well, welcome back to Curious Mondays. This is your weekly dose of inspiration from Hyper Island. For those of you who don't know me, I think I know some of you. My name's Peter. So I was from Crew 8, and I also help out on some of the learning facilitation here at Hyper Island. So today, what I thought I'd try and do is tell you a little bit about authentic leadership. And so the topic here, as we've written it out, is the courage to be authentic in leadership, how we can be better leaders by looking within. I'm hoping that my computer will press to the next. Oh, there we go. It pressed ahead. So there was two components when thinking about, because I think the team asked me to talk about something that I was curious about and I had either learnt in the master's program or perhaps through my working life. So having led agencies across the region and also some global clients, I thought that probably one of the interesting parts that sort of cropped up was leading people, because it's an important element in terms of leadership, and also how you go about it and what you do within this new digital age, because it's different from how we did it before. And one of the things I thought about was, because often there's a little bit of introspection that goes with leadership. And I think that in the past, certainly in my earlier days, there was a sense that a lot of my focus would be outer and not inner. And I don't know if you guys have heard about the Oracle at Delphi. The Oracle at Delphi was around for about 1,000 years. There wasn't just one person, there was a number of them, of course. And she used to advise kings, just about anybody, farmers and so forth, in terms of their future and predictions and so forth. What I found interesting was that there was 47 maxims that were written into the temple that were readily followed, and they're worthwhile having a look at. But the first one, I think, is one of the most famous, and you've probably heard about it as well, and that is know thyself. And I think in terms of leadership, this is particularly important, and knowing yourself as a person. There's a great need to understand who you are and why you do things. I think often we go through this life and we can react to a lot of things and situations. Knowing yourself is understanding why, being self-aware, having the ability to reflect. And I think that was one of the other big learnings coming to Hyper Island, in recognizing the value and the importance of reflection. Also understanding what you hold dear, because as a leader, you need to then understand how far you're going to push yourself, or what you're going to do or not going to do, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And often I don't think we find that we have enough time to do that. And there's a real need to do that if you're a leader. And also knowing, I'm not going to really delve on this, but also knowing your lightness and your darkness. Not shunting away that bit of you that you know, or, there's a darkness in me that I shouldn't touch. Understanding it helps you be the person that you are. And in knowing yourself, you can know others. And in knowing others, you also need to be authentic. And I think the Greek word for it was authentikos as such, which was one acting on one's own authority, being yourself. And this can be really challenging, because often in life and often in leadership positions, you have to wear different masks or put on different hats. And does that mean I need to change who I am? How does that work? And that can sometimes obscure who I am as a person. And I think you've all seen the Seven Samurai, and it actually, when I looked at it, I was looking at it early and I was thinking, maybe this is an agile team. these close teams that are now used in, this new digital world where you're all got to work together. And in many ways, this team did, and they all understood their strengths and weaknesses. And the point here is that, and in knowing yourself, you also need to know your team to appreciate and recognize and build on and complement their strengths and weaknesses. And often I don't think we think about that enough. And it's an important part, I think, in terms of being a leader, knowing yourself, knowing others. What are their attitudes? What are their behaviors? What are their motivations for doing things? How do you motivate them? To hear diversity in their perspectives. I can think back, 20 years ago in leading teams, and, often you thought that the leader was supposed to be the one with all the answers. And in many ways, sometimes you feel like you need to do that today, but that's really not the strength of a team. The strength of the team is being able to hear the diversity in perspectives and see the bigger picture out there, because they have experiences that differ from us and can complement who you are. To have the ability to reflect on subjects you're opposed to as well, that can be very difficult, and that also takes a little bit of self-awareness as well. To give space to ideas or events or circumstances and perhaps not react. And connect to emotions that underpin experiences so that you have empathy. I think great leaders today have empathy with situations, but they are empathizing with the emotion that comes with an experience. And there's a separation of those, which helps you then realize or recognize what's happening within the team or that particular person. And that's the way that you basically build deeper connections with the team. But one of the critical values that I think I've learned from this and what's come out of it is the value of vulnerability. Now, this is a challenging one because vulnerability is about uncertainty and risk and emotional exposure as a leader. And as you know, in businesses today, everybody is about certainty, stability, continuity. We want to make sure that our numbers are confirmed for next year. We need to know that everything's going to be okay. Well, we know that in this environment that it's not. Things change on a hairpin today. And navigating this new digital world, which is really changing every category, we sometimes need to navigate with a compass and perhaps not a map or the playbook that they're given to you when you join the company. Pretty important. So as a leader, we therefore need to wrestle with tough conversations with our team, to be more emotionally exposed or take a risk in terms of how you might be perceiving something or look at something. Listening with the same passion that you wish to be heard. And, I make the mistake. Sometimes I listen to get ready to provide an answer when I should be listening to really listen to the person that's trying to provide an alternative opinion or a point of view, absorb it, reflect it, and then, okay, I understand that. So that means there's a sense of respecting and really caring for others as well in the team. And I think, some of that may be missed in more of a hierarchical approach to leadership. And that's where I think it's changed. You need to empathize and respect the people around you. Knowing your team and providing opportunities to build them up and make them better. Now, I kind of get that little bit from my mother because my mum was a teacher. And what she used to talk about was the best way to build someone up was to praise them and give them some encouragement. And sometimes that doesn't happen in the real world, yeah? So a little story here is an illustration of that. I had a new team member who joined up when I ran the Heineken global business for many years, and I needed somebody to complement me on the team. And he came from Australia, and he was very good at production and had some experience in the alcohol category. And we were walking into a major presentation to the client, and he had just arrived. And we were about to get the global marketing director to sign off on a new creative campaign that nobody had thought of, nobody had considered, and it was talking to more of a younger target audience. So for me, it was pretty important, and there were some aspects of the production area that I wasn't 100% sure of. So there was a little bit of a risk involved in this meeting. Robbie was the fellow's name who was accompanying me to Amsterdam at the Heineken offices to have this pretty significant meeting. And I think they were going to spend something like $800,000 just on the photography of the project. And I was in the meeting, and the client asked a few questions, and I turned to Robbie and I said, "What do you think?" Well, his eyes lit up. He was very happy because this was his strength. I was in a very vulnerable position. It helped me build a bond with him and also a sense of psychological safety as well, because I was trusting him and he was trusting me. So he then went on to say, "Thanks, Peter. I think we should do this. I think that, you know, I've worked with a number of photographers and and we had a very, very successful meeting." So that's an illustration of a number of components of leadership, but more importantly, an aspect of vulnerability that strengthen not only the relationship, the outcome of the business, but also the way we work with the client. And for me, it was, you know, it was a great meeting as such. And I'm going to put this book down. Bren Brown, for those of you who have done the Leading Teams Masters session, this is something that Melanie and I think Peachy relate to or reference during the session. And I think during the session, and I can't remember if any of you were in it when I was presenting this, Melanie said to me, "Can you be vulnerable during this session?" I said, "Sure." And I was actually wondering why she was saying that. And I was who I was, which is a little bit vulnerable, not only in life, but also in work. But I read this book by Bren Brown, and I then realized the power of vulnerability. There's a lot that goes with it, and it does take you out of your comfort zone, but there's a lot of reward that comes with it as well. I'd highly recommend it, and part of my conversation today is based on this. Our ability to be daring leaders will never be greater than our capacity for vulnerability. So showing, recognizing, and being vulnerable is a skill that helped me develop great teams, whether I was running the agency, the regional networks, or global clients. I built lifelong friendships through this, having this vulnerability, being open and genuine in conversation and connections. But the lens in which I built this vulnerability, and as part of my leadership, again, was linked to how my mother kind of raised us, which was about nurturing and praise. And that kind of framed the way that I approached people. So there was a little bit more empathy in how I connected. So showing my vulnerability during times of uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure, but was also not easy. You also feel anxious and uncertain, but you need to go through that to be able to connect. And I think you feel a great release once you've kind of gone through that process. Having the courage to show up anyway, win, lose, or draw, and be vulnerable, I think is part of being a great leader. Some people would say that these are opposites, but I would say that they're complementaries. You can't be vulnerable without being courageous, and you can't be courageous without being vulnerable. And there's no empirical evidence that shows that being vulnerable is a weakness. In fact, it's a strength, which I've kind of learned over the last couple of years. So maybe my slide will go to the next one. I'll have to go back. Here we go. So what I've actually done in reflection of this exercise that the team asked me to do was I've kind of relearned and remembered that I needed to demonstrate my vulnerability to be a better leader. And in doing so, I've been able to reconnect on a deeper level with my teammates and the people that I'm trying to guide as such. I ask their advice. I seek input and feedback as well. That's also part of being vulnerable, because you're asking someone else, especially the team members that you know and trust, because you understand their strengths and weaknesses, to be able to get their advice. And as you remember in the Hyper Island Way Week, often building on the openness and trust principle that strengthens the team. And again, critical to approaching this new digital environment, because of the speed, collaboration, innovation is highly valued, and this is the way you do it. Oh, these slides are taking a little bit slower than I thought. I'm not sure why. Technology never really works for you when you want it. Let me press it again. Oh, there we are. So just as a thought in signing off today, the strength of the team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team. So what I've learned is that vulnerability leads to deeper emotional connections. And studies have kind of showed that. And I would leave you with this thought that vulnerability can be your superpower in leading teams, leading people, and also understanding yourself. So as I understand it, that's it for today. That concludes our sharing for this week. If you want to stick around for the Q&A, please feel welcome. But otherwise, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.